Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's Assassins for Hire when I put Michael Winner's The Mechanic against Luis Llosa's The Specialist. And this one was a fun one to get through because both of these films have a lot of action and are very layered, we'll say. So let's dive right on into the first one, The Mechanic, directed by Michael Winner and starring Charles Bronson as the titular character. He's called The Mechanic because basically he orchestrates these, he's a hitman who orchestrates these hits to look like accidents and stuff. And the opening sequence is pretty brilliant where we see him, how meticulous he is in setting this up. You know, we see the beauty of it too is there's no dialogue. You know, one of the great things about Charles Bronson is like he was somebody that was better when he was silent. You know, the less he said was usually the better because he could usually emote more with a facial look or a gesture or something, you know, and the way and the way it's staged and shot, and of course the music by Jerry Fielding is so haunting. There are times when the music makes this film seem like a horror film, and it is done. It's shot very dark and drab, and you know, very slowly paced. This is a true thriller. You know, there's a lot of action in it too, so it's not like just boring and shit. Like there's a lot of great chase sequences and stuff because the conflict arises when a friend of Charles Bronson's, Keenan Wynn, who's like a big gangster type guy, he's in some shit because he, you know, fucked somebody over or something. So they're out to get him because then that becomes his next, Charles Bronson's next hit is Keenan Wynn, even though Keenan Wynn's character asks him to help him out, but there's really no helping him because now he's the next hit. And Keenan Wynn's son is played by Jan Michael Vincent, who's really brilliant at playing just a spoiled little brat prick, you know, real piece of shit. But, you know, but then after his father dies, he ends up getting in league with Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson kind of takes Jan Michael Vincent under his wing and teaches him the tricks of the trade of being a mechanic and all this stuff. And, you know, of course, the dude, like, you know, is like, immediately after his father's funeral, there's a wild ass party at his father's house, and it's like, well, all this is mine now, and they're all celebrating. It's like, my father didn't like my friends. I'm starting to think I don't like my friends either. You know, it's like he's just a real asshole, but he plays it perfectly. You're holding your own against somebody like Charles Bronson. That's pretty impressive too. And you know, we see him. You know, it's a long, arduous process to get this kid to be a professional, and there's never like, you know, it's never fully there. And the beauty of like Charles Bronson's character is like he's the smartest one in the film, but he's always like seems to be the one everybody underestimates the most. He's kind of calm, and you know, and this film originally was written to be, you know, where their relationship was of the homosexual variety, but they changed that, and you kind of see the there's certain moments where like there's frames of like, you know, maybe Jan Michael Vincent's ass and just the way that Bronson kind of looks at him and stuff, you know, it's very intimated, but the way the movie actually plays is like, you know, it's a weird kind of Shakespearean fucking drama because like the way that Charles Bronson's father was taken out in the backstory of all this is the same way that he took out Jan Michael Vincent's father, Keenan Wynn. And so in his mind, he knows that like this kid is gonna fucking kill him because, you know, he's gonna find out eventually. You know, it's just kind of the way the cycle runs in this world, and it's not overstated. The film's very understated. You know, it's a bit like it just plays like a real thriller, and of course very accentuated by Jerry Fielding's music. And Michael Winner was one of the better directors to direct Charles Bronson, you know, to really utilize Bronson to his fullest potential. And that ending is one of the best things because Jan Michael Vincent ends up killing Charles Bronson, and you know, kid thinks he's all hot shit. He's just got away. You know, he's avenged his father's death and all this shit, and gets in that car, sees that fucking note where it's like, kid, if you're seeing this, that means I didn't make it back, and it just means that you've also, you know, started a 13-second detonator, and so kaboom, and just fucking blows up, and the movie ends fucking brilliant. Because that was another thing about Charles Bronson that kind of set him apart from, especially at this moment in his career, is that he wasn't afraid to die in a movie. You know, and so that makes that just one of the best, not just one of the best Charles Bronson movies, but one of the best like action thrillers of the 70s. And then we move forward to Luis Llosa's The Specialist, starring Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone. Sylvester Stallone is a similar in a similar kind of profession, you know. I mean, he's called the specialist, and he's an explosives expert. You know, we see him at the beginning of the film with James Woods, who's his partner. Stallone's the rigger, and James Woods is the trigger. And they have a falling out because James Woods has no qualms about blowing up a kid, you know, as long as they're in the same vehicle as a drug lord and stuff. And of course, Stallone's character, as most of his characters in his films do, they have like a code of ethics and honor and all this stuff. And there's like things they won't do, you know, which is commendable, but he never shuts the fuck up about them. You know, real sensitive, tough guy type thing, which was most of the characters that Stallone played in films, and this one is no exception. So after that, they both break away from that, but now Stallone is kind of like a bomb for hire, so to speak. And Sharon Stone plays a woman that is, you know, her when she was a girl, her family was killed by these gangsters and stuff, which Eric Roberts is one of them, and it's the crime family led by Rod Steiger, who, like, Rod Steiger is one of the greatest actors of all time, but there were moments where they put him in stuff where he had to be a different ethnicity than he actually was. Dude, white as fuck. But, like, you know, with movies like A Fistful of Dynamite, also known as Duck You Sucker, the Sergio Leone film where he plays a Mexican, he's doing kind of the same accent in The Specialist as he is in Duck You Sucker, but I guess it's more fitted to what a gangster of that ilk would be in Miami, Florida. But it gets to the point where, like, this movie is like a fucking cartoon, you know. Sharon Stone hires Sylvester Stallone to basically get revenge on this crime family. And he's hesitant at first. He doesn't want to do it. He's, I don't fucking work in Florida. I don't do these types of jobs, you know. But then, like, he gets what the centerpiece of this film is kind of this weird little romance that they have between Stallone and Sharon Stone, because like, I like your voice and all this shit. And it's just like, gets kind of, you know, it's got the jazzy music, you know, it's real flashy because it takes place in Miami and all this shit. And, you know, but most of the motherfuckers in this movie are phoning it in, because now James Woods is working for the crime family that Stallone's after, so there's like that edginess to it. But James Woods is phoning it in. He's hamming it up only the way that James Woods can ham it up. And, you know, like I said, Stallone's playing his basic ass character. Now, there are, like, the action I wouldn't say is better than the mechanic, but some of the stuff that they do with the explosions is pretty impressive. You know, they don't really disappoint in the explosion department, but the acting is below mid. Like I said, it's like a fucking cartoon. Now, you can't really fault a movie like this for being like that, because that's what it's meant to be. But if we're going off what's the better movie, you know, the acting just fucking sucks, because, like, everybody's just there to do that thing that they do. You know, Stallone being the sensitive, tough guy. You know, a lot of good hand-to-hand fight sequences. That sequence on the bus where he's going to give his seat to that pregnant woman, but the dude takes it instead, and he just whoops all their asses, throws them out of the fucking bus. And, you know, blowing up that piece of that hotel, that shit was pretty badass. So the movie definitely has its moments, but in between those, it's like, and there is a level of sexiness to it, you know, like seeing Stallone and Sharon Stone fuck, that's pretty sexy, you know. Like, Stallone had no qualms about showing his ass, and Sharon Stone definitely had no qualms about doing nudity. I mean, she flashed her twat in Basic Instinct, so that's all steamy and a shower and everything, you know. But, you know, it's kind of like very underused. Eric Roberts might be the best actor in this movie, and he can't even, like, flex his acting nuts in this, because, like, even the director, I haven't seen any other films that he's done, is pretty much at this point in Stallone's career, if he wasn't directing, he would get a director that could just do whatever the fuck he wanted them to do. He's not getting some auteur director to make a film, you know. He's got an image that he's got to preserve, and unless it's comedy, he really didn't step out of his normal thing. So this round clearly has to go to the mechanic, because on top of everything else, the ending is way better, because the ending of The Specialist is lame as fuck. Of course, he blows everybody up. Stallone never loses, unless pretty much after Rocky, Stallone never loses, so it's kind of predictable. You know what's going to happen in the first frame of the fucking movie, and he ends up getting the chick at the end. Like, him and Sharon Stone ride off into the sunset to fucking turn the beat around. You know, it's just like pretty fucking lame. Whereas, like, the mechanic, that is one of the greatest endings of all time. Just to have, even though Charles Bronson dies, he blows the fucking kid up at the end. Jan Michael Vincent doesn't know shit, and he ain't, so it's, this round goes to the mechanic. For anybody keeping score, that is 65-52. The 70s are up by 13 now. They're fucking smoking the 90s. I mean, when it comes to, we're getting more into the action films, like, it's gonna be hit and miss. It's gonna be up and down kind of, because action films in the 70s were pretty great. Because I would say the thing about the 70s is their action stars were better. I mean, you had motherfuckers like Charles Bronson and Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood and many others, And then in the 90s, you had like Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis doing decent movies, but not as good as the shit that they did in the 80s. So you kind of get like second string of these action stars. Whereas like, but even in the 70s, like somebody like Charles Bronson had been in the game for like, 20 years before or at least 20 years before he did The Mechanic. And this was kind of his second win almost. So like, and he just became this fucking badass action star. Like, you don't fuck with Bronson. It's like Bronson, like, he was edgy. You didn't always know what was going to happen in his movies. Maybe by the time the 80s come around, they become predictable. But in the 70s, they were so vibrant and intense that you couldn't fuck with them. So if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. This is all open for debate. This is one asshole's opinion. This is a self-indulgent academic journey to see what decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. Any film professors that want to use this shit, let's talk compensation, because, ain't nobody work for free. Don't be using my shit if you ain't gonna pay up and stuff, And if you got any suggestions, I got like 6 pages of these things. I'm gonna be doing this shit for until I'll do all of them, because I got to know. I gotta prove academically, scientifically, whatever the fuck label you want to attach to it. But Charles Bronson, I believe, could whoop Stallone's ass, and he definitely did this round, because The Mechanic is a great fucking movie. The Specialist, great cartoon, maybe a good fat movie, but definitely, can't hold a flickering birthday candle to the likes of The Mechanic. So stay tuned for more. The next main event, we get another Bronson round next Saturday. It'll be Breakheart Pass versus Under Siege 2 Dark Territory. So we're starting the year off with a bang, so enjoy it.